Okay, need to call the meeting of the District Operations Committee to order. It's November 15th and roll call, please.
Good morning. Director Matt Sampson,
Here.
Director Monty Schmidt,
Here.
Director Jed Smith,
Here.
Vice Chair Ranjiv Kush,
Here.
and Chair Larry Russell.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay. Need a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Any comments on the agenda?
There are none.
Roll call, please.
Director Sampson,
Yes.
Director Schmidt,
Yes.
Director Smith,
Aye.
Vice Chair Kush,
Aye.
Chair Russell.
Aye.
Thank you.
Public comment on non-agenda items.
There are none.
Okay, that's cool. Need a motion to approve the minutes of the Operations Committee from October 18, 2024.
So moved. Second.
Roll call.
Director Sampson,
Yes.
Director Schmidt,
Yes.
Director Smith,
Aye.
Vice Chair Kush,
Aye.
Chair Russell,
Aye.
and there are no comments on that.
Okay, cool. District paving program update.
Hi, good morning, Chair Russell, board members, Alex and I, Engineering Director. This morning I have with me Mark Hasray, Engineering Manager Construction, who will be providing an update to the paving program. So take it away, Mark.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Good morning, members of the board. This presentation will go over our paving program, as well as some of the cost-saving measures that we've been implementing to address a growing paving costs that we've been seeing. And we'll also discuss our pavement management study that's been underway over the last year. So a brief outline of the presentation. We're going to recap what our paving program is. We'll discuss the paving cost savings measures that we've been implementing. We'll go over a statewide initiative that's been convened to address a similar issue throughout the state of California. And we'll highlight our recent pavement management study that we implemented and some of the conclusions that came from that study. And then, of course, next steps with our proposed pilot. So as a municipal water agency in California, we have certain rights and obligations. We have a statutory right to utilize public streets or highways to maintain and install our water infrastructure, so long as that we coordinate with the jurisdictions having authority, in this case, cities and the county within Marin. With that right, certain obligations as well. We are obligated to restore the street its condition to its formal state of usefulness as nearly as may be. So our paving program, there's two key aspects. Our operational paving needs are met through an on-call contract that performs more than 400 restorations per year. And our capital project paving needs are executed as bid items for both capital and fire flow pipeline replacement projects. In either circumstance, any work that's required in the county or the city right away requires an encroachment permit for that work. And it's these encroachment permits that dictate the pavement restoration requirements. And so the key issue facing our district, as well as many other municipalities in California, are this growing pavement restoration requirements that are imposed by these jurisdictions, which of course corresponds to a growing increase in our paving costs. So the plot here shows our operational paving costs over time as compared to the Engineering News Record Construction Cost Index, as well as our paving contract unit pricing. And it's essentially this growth in costs that prompted some of the work that you'll be seeing in this presentation today. So just some measures that we've implemented actively over the last couple of years to essentially adapt to these cost increases. We're kind of shifting how we plan, design, and construct our pipeline replacement projects. One of those examples is how we coordinate with these jurisdictions, because they all have paving projects. Coordinating with them allows us some opportunities to combine work and receive some cost savings and reduce the impacts to the community. We're taking a more proactive approach to negotiating pavement restoration limits during the encroachment permit process for both operational projects and capital projects. And we're also laying out our pipeline on our pipeline replacement projects in a more optimal way to minimize our pavement restoration. And this diagram on the right kind of demonstrates that. You can see our new water pipeline with a thick black line, and our lane lines or roadway lanes identified with the red. And so essentially, you know, this is an example where we can locate the water main within a single lane, right? If we were to locate the water main a little further down, let's say under this middle lane, we would be required to repave 2 lanes essentially. So it's a way that we are adapting to this issue. So another important cost saving measure to highlight is that we continue to really proactively prioritize our pipeline projects in areas where there's known leaks. You know, a few examples are the Sir Francis Drake and Granada pipeline replacement projects, as well as some of this upcoming work we're doing on Bridgeway in the town of Sausalito. And the district is not alone in some of the challenges that it's been facing. This is a statewide issue, and Aqua has convened a paving standards subcommittee to examine some of the same things that we're looking at, essentially how paving standards across the state affect our utilities, as well as what that relationship looks like amongst you know, the cities and counties and water and sewer utilities.
Are we active in that group?
Yes,
Good.
yeah, very active.
I know in Aqua, but in that actual committee?
In that committee specifically,
Right.
yes. And they of course have a similar goal, right? Is to better understand, you know, how our work impacts roadways and identify opportunities for collaboration and cost savings. So about a year ago, we began a pavement management study to approach, you know, this issue in a more scientific way. We wanted to truly better understand from a pavement engineering perspective, you know, a number of things. One, how our work impacts the roadways. That's an important item. But also, if there's any opportunities to pursue alternative pavement restorations that may address the primary concern, which of course is the structural functional integrity of the road, but also the concerns that we have. We've completed 2 of those 3 tasks, and essentially we are underway with our pilot program. We're pursuing alternative standards that we're going to use to share with various partners. And we're within our original schedule and our original budget. So as I said earlier, it is important to understand how we affect roadway when we do underground work. Pavement utility cuts and our restoration trenches do impact the structural and functional performance of a roadway. And that's kind of shown here. It's important to understand these impacts because they're the primary concerns by the jurisdictions having authority, and they often inform the paving standards that are imposed. So in order to identify common solutions, we need to better understand, you know, how our work impacts these jurisdictions. So bear with me as I kind of walk through this slide a little bit, but this was part of our conclusion in our study. We utilized Paver, which is a pavement management software that stores roadway inventory data and pavement condition to identify distresses and the functional and structural integrities of the road. So we wanted to use this software to identify how our patchwork might affect the structural integrity or the pavement condition index of the road. So on the left here is just an image of an existing roadway with a patch. And imagine essentially this patch varies in width. So we studied how our patch varies by assigning 10 different roads, PCIs from 0 to 100. And again, PCI is a condition rating. That's a function of the distresses that are observed on the road. So cracking, structural issues. So we wanted to see if we varied the patch, what would happen to the rating of the road, to see kind of how this software perceives patches. So essentially, what we identified is that for roadways in good condition, which are around 60 to 100, as you increase the patch size or the percent of the total area of the patch, it actually identified a reduction in PCI. And this suggests that, essentially by arbitrarily increasing the patch size, which is kind of what we're seeing on these standards, we might actually have a deleterious effect on the roadway, right? So it suggests that maybe that's not the most appropriate way to restore the road. Conversely, when you see a road that's either failed, which is a PCI of 0, or in poor condition, basically between, let's say, 10 and 30, as you increase the patch size, you're actually addressing the existing distresses in the road, and therefore increasing the structural capacity and increasing the condition of the road, and suggesting essentially a betterment to that roadway, right? You're improving the rating of that road.
It's my recollection from my asphalt class that the subbase is the key to the survival of the top. Is it likely that the patch is better compacted than the average or worse?
Well, it's an excellent point. The subgrade is extremely important in the overall structural integrity of the road. When you introduce a patch, you're affecting the homogeneous structure of the roadway, right? And so the road will actually respond more poorly as you increase the patch. The compaction, is similar. It's is tested at 98%. Your question was, do you believe the 2-inch grind and overlay, the restoration is a greater density than the subgrade?
Yeah, that's my question. That is it likely that we do more work compacting than the original paving contractor did, and maybe that's why the patch behaves better or worse?
It's possible. I think that would be more like kind of on a case by case basis. I think, the development of the roadway reconstruction should be similar. They meet the same compaction requirements, but it's, as the road ages and essentially, starts cracking and failing, when you restore the patch, the 2-inch grind and overlay, you're going to improve the roadway. And that's kind of what we saw on this study.
And the point of that is, at some point, betterment is beyond our responsibility. So
Yeah.
good quality roads, we're increase the patch, we're bringing it down. Poor quality, it gets to a betterment issue, which at some point, exceeds the responsibility of the water district.
It was funny. I was in Las Vegas yesterday and I was talking to them about they're repaving Las Vegas Boulevard today for the race next week. And they told me that the first time they did it last year, they had to rebuild the whole subbase, the whole thing up.
Yeah.
This time it's just taking 2 inches off and repaving it. Of course, it's nice to have annual repaving as well, huh? But
Actually, that's a really interesting point, actually. So if you have a completely failed roadway, often the subgrade needs to be replaced, as you're noting.
Yeah.
So the current standard or the current way of restoration is to require a 2-inch grind and overlay. That often might not be the best solution because your failure is in the structural section below that. So your 2-inch grind and overlay comes at a high cost and not a lot of value overall. You'll see that 2-inch grind and overlay fail pretty quickly.
yeah, it's my recollection that alligatoring, which is what you're talking about, the cracking, just reflects the cracks in the subbase.
Yeah.
It just comes right up through the
Yep.
flexible pavement. So
Exactly. And any surface, micro or 2-inch, restoration will realize that exact same failure because it comes
do we
through.
attempt to put the same fill material, the base under the pavement that's already there? Or do we just use what we use?
No, we use a Caltrans Class 2 aggregate base that meets the standard of the state, highway requirements.
So presumably that's what's under most of it?
For the new roadways, yes. Old roadways, maybe not. Maybe just native material that
How old's old?
How old is old? I would say decades, like 30, 40-year-old roads may not have any aggregate base below them and might just have native soil that they paved over. It might have concrete in the subgrade system, you know? So yeah, we use, the best material that science understands today for providing that structure.
Yep.
But it was a good point that what we're trying to do is identify a more informed way of restoring our roadways that provides the function, the integrity of the roadway, right? Without necessarily arbitrarily pursuing just a complete repavement.
Do we do the same patch regardless of the traffic?
So yes, yeah, the patch really is not so much a function of the traffic, the structural plug section.
But its life is though.
Yeah,
know,
absolutely.
It's got
Mhm.
H20 loads running over all the time.
Yes.
What I recall is that each semi truck is 20,000 passes of a car.
Yeah.
Equivalent damage to the paving.
Yeah, yeah. So the traffic index or the traffic rating, whether it might be designated as a residential or arterial or collector road, informs the structural reconstruction requirement. So when we do a trench, we backfill that trench and then we apply a structural asphalt plug, what we call it. And that plug, that thickness will vary based on the traffic index or the rating that roadway is. So that might be a 6-inch, that might be an 8-inch, it might be a 4-inch, but that's the structural section that we install in our trench. And then the 2-inch grind and overlay is more of the cosmetic, solution to eliminate joints to kind of seal the roadway over our trench lines, right? So, and it's really that 2-inch grind and overlay that we believe there's an opportunity to optimize, save costs, but also not at a compromise to our jurisdictional partners.
So
Right?
are you saying that we fix it and then we come back and grind it out and fix it again?
That is what I'm saying. Yes, yes. And it's
That's what
not
I
so
thought you were
much,
saying.
it's more of a sequence issue really, but essentially it's how we construct our roadways, right? A lot of it is a function of the fact that we need to open that roadway to traffic, right? So, when we are restoring our trench, that's kind of step one. And the structural plug section, the thicker asphalt section, will have to be brought up to grade to allow traffic over that, right? And it would be cost prohibitive to, leave 2 inches down and then plate the road, for example, to allow traffic or so on and so forth. So we just do a structural plug. And this is a standard across everywhere, the state, counties, cities, everywhere. It's the exact same restoration. Then when we do the final cap, the 2-inch grind and overlay, we come in, we grind, it could be 4 feet, 10 feet, it could be the full width of the roadway, but we will grind down typically 2 inches and then repave for a nice new, aesthetic essentially. So really, the key conclusions of the pavement management study was when you extend a utility patch beyond what may be necessary on a roadway in good condition, maybe it's a new roadway or high PCI, the larger that patch, the more likely it is that you're creating more problems for the road, that you're degrading the road faster, that you're actually lowering the rating of the road. Conversely, extending the utility patch beyond what's necessary for a road in poor condition could result in a betterment of the road. You're actually improving the roadway beyond what essentially should be our responsibility as a water agency. However, it is important to also know that how our trenches impact pavement depends on many factors, and understanding the in situ conditions is critical to developing an appropriate standard per site, right? And therein lies the challenge that we face with the pilot program. We want to identify, appropriate pavement restorations under various circumstances. And that's kind of where we are today. We've taken the results, we've taken some lessons learned from this pavement study, and we're developing our pilot program right now for essentially identifying various alternatives that we could implement in lieu of kind of a more standard, ubiquitous restoration that we've seen to date. We're going to take our ideas and we're going to share that with a number of partnering agencies and look to implement this program early next year. And we will bring an update to the board when we make some progress on that.
Thank you. Questions?
this fascinating stuff, you know, and it also really important for us financially. If you can go back to the graphic that you had that shows the sort of basically kind of indicates the optimization of the repair versus
Is
the
it this
PCI.
this
No,
one?
yes.
Okay.
So I mean, I think this gets to your point, which is that there's sort of an optimum, you know, if you don't want to make the road worse, you reduce the width. You also, if we're also not going to pay for betterment, that's really not our responsibility. There's a perfect sort of, you know, somewhere in the 60, you know, the PCI 60, you know, range where we're basically making good on what we need to repair, what we need to replace.
That's exactly right. That's exactly what we're seeing. Yeah.
But then you also said something about the in situ conditions
Mhm.
might shift these curves because depending on, I'm not sure if I understood my question, which is you said that the in situ conditions might change the nature of this relationship.
Yeah, yeah, and it is a surprisingly complex, study, right? In general, so this study was we generalized it, right? We took baseline initial conditions, assigned distresses that would raise or lower the PCI, and then saw what a patch would do, right? So in general, this is what we're observing, right? But in the field, there's different conditions. There's traffic ratings. There's load that the roadway is subjected to. And that would, I wouldn't say shift, but that is necessary to inform what an appropriate restoration should be. In other words, just as much as we can expect, somebody to tell us repave the entire road that might have already been failed, we can't arbitrarily, reduce a pavement restoration because we believe that's the right thing to do. We need to use informed judgment. We need to use science to identify appropriate restorations, and we believe we can do that in an efficient manner.
Cool. So I imagine you might rebuild or make multiple curves depending on your in situ circumstances that you just mentioned, and that might be the way. So that fascinating. Is the city participating in this pilot? Are they like aware of how we've done this, and are they?
So
You know, and I'll just begin with the end in mind, which is if they've understood how we've approached the analysis, so that they have some understanding and buy-in that the way we're going about answering this question, which makes tons of sense to me for whatever it's worth. But if the city or whoever at the city who needs to really also understand it and support the way the analysis is going, it's really important that there's that buy-in. And if you could maybe speak to that.
yeah,
Want me to take this one?
well, I'll just say that, we wanted to better understand, the opportunities before engaging the cities and the county. We want to ensure that, we understood the situation and that we understood the opportunities with kind of what our ideas are. And so now that we've completed kind of these two tasks, this overall evaluation, and we've developed some recommendations for cost saving measures for alternative pavement standards, we will begin that discussion with partners that we're going to identify. And so to answer your question directly, they've not been a part of this study. They will be a part of the pilot program when we approach them. In the coming days.
And in developing the pilot and sitting down with them, and there's a couple cities we've been talking to about this that know about it and have some measure of interest. This is not going to be easy, as you know. Roads are very difficult for cities to manage with limited funding. And it's their biggest cost center outside of public safety. And part of, I think, is our strategy is to differentiate us from utilities broadly, because, utilities in their mind are the ones that are always chewing up their roads. In fact, in Mill Valley, they just did that paving downtown, and, we did the pipe work that Mark mentioned in concert with that, and PG&E or Comcast, I forget which one, but Todd was telling me went up and just already is tearing up the road, and they're talking to them about you got to repave it completely again. So it's just a constant battle. So this is going to be a slow process bringing them along, and I do think that this initial piece provides us kind of some grounding on how to engage the cities in the language and that sort of stuff that was important.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Mark, Alex, for the presentation. I know specifically there's been some discussion with the town of Fairfax to coordinate some of our pipe work with paving. I think. Is there any am I correct on that? And are there any updates on where that's going?
Yes, you're correct, Director Kush. We have been in coordination with the town of Fairfax on Park Road, which is a project they're planning to do storm drain improvements. This was just brought to our attention, so we're expediting that work to get a design and working closely with them to get in before they do their road improvement or their storm drain improvement, and then they're going to be paving the entire road. So that's going to be one of those situations where we do have that opportunity to, optimize our replacing old cast iron pipe ahead of a paving project. So we don't have to do this full 8 or 10-foot wide restoration. So we'll be only doing a plug pave there. And that's also going to lead into the future Bolinas Road project as well, that we're currently working with them on the restoration limits and all that for that project.
Good, because I know this is a big issue for Fairfax in particular, the quality of their roads and anything that we can do to improve their efficiencies with road management would be great. We didn't talk about coordination with other utilities when they're doing work. I don't know if that's within the scope of this, pilot or something we'd consider. But I know in my neighborhood, there was a big effort by Ross Valley Sanitary District to replace all the sewage lines. And after that, full repaving of all the streets. That could have been an opportunity for us to go in and maybe do some work on pipes. I don't know if we've ever looked into those, kind of planning in conjunction with other utilities, or if that's an option.
Yeah, we typically do coordinate with municipalities and jurisdictions, and they usually have the know as to when PG&E or the sanitary district is going to come in for a project in that area. So when we coordinate them, they usually have a 2-year CIP. We evaluate that, and then we reach out to them, and then they're like, oh yeah, by the way, Ross is doing a sewer here, so it may make sense to sequence both of your guys' work before we do our road restoration. So we did find that opportunity in Butterfield a few years back, where Ross did the work. We came and did our pipeline, then they repaved, and it actually worked out for everyone. But it's very difficult to coordinate with the jurisdictions and then the utilities independently, where it's usually better to, coordinate directly with the jurisdiction, since they are kind of the clearinghouse of all the work that's done there. So they know the upcoming work happening. And that's usually where we have an opportunity to do joint work if needed.
Right. So those offices of public works, that's where the coordination really should be happening.
Correct.
Got it. Thank you.
Just one question. I think you mentioned it last time, but are the jurisdictions, do they have their own studies in terms of what's going to be optimal patch size, optimal paving thing for them?
So local jurisdictions may, they do use consultant services to assess and assign roadway ratings throughout the entire county. As part of our study, as part of better informing ourselves of their perspective, we found a number of studies, not local to Marin, but throughout the United States and Canada, Calgary, the city of Anaheim, city of Ontario. They had a number of really good studies that shared the public works perspective on that. And they do recommend certain things. And a lot of it coincides with what we've looked at as well. So we wanted to have that nexus there.
Great. And then as soon as we figure out what jurisdictions are interested in piloting, it'd be good to hear which ones are on board. Thank you.
It's very interesting. It seems to me that it almost argues for curb to curb replacement rather than patching. So I suggest you be careful how you draw the conclusions, because I think that's kind of a logical outcome of this. And I know that in Paris, that's what they've insisted on, is curb to curb. And as a result of replacement of the lead service laterals. So they refuse to have a checkerboard situation on the roads.
Well, and that's the challenge that all of the utilities face. Our data suggests that there is a way to optimize this, right? But a lot of it is a concern of aesthetics. A lot of it, people don't want to see joints in the road. They don't want to drive over small bumps. That's that raises essentially the issue is what is a reasonable restoration to its prior state of usefulness as nearly as may be, right? And so we're trying to find that while working closely with our partners here, you know.
Yeah, and they're not necessarily partners by choice, unfortunately. Consequential. Yeah, it's a tricky one because you can understand their role, their thinking, right? If they can pass the cost to us, that's better for them. And then they've got and the roads brought back up to today's date as opposed to 20 or 30. I know where I live, my house was built in 65 and they hadn't repaved. And finally the county gave in and repaved. But then it was funny because the street in front of my house didn't get repaved because of the cost of curb cuts for ADA compliance.
Mm.
That exceeded the budget. So they had to come back and they did do it, come back and finish it. It was pretty funny though. It's a tricky area. And I think the problem part is that it's taken for granted. You know, people don't even think about the asphalt. You know, it's just there. And I think they noticed alligatoring and things like that. But even that really is more of an aesthetic situation than even ride. You know, potholes, of course, is different. Right? But I'm glad you're doing this and good luck with, I think there's 9 cities we deal with or something like that. Yeah, I don't know if you can get enough continuity in the city to actually pull this thing together. It sounds to me like perhaps, and Ranjiv's comment is an interesting one, that the county or somebody needs to have a coordinator in this. There would be nice to have somebody with a spreadsheet that said, okay, Tiburon's going to do this. Is the repair on something like Tiburon Boulevard the same as it is on a side street? It's a state highway.
You know, there's a high level of complexity with this issue, as you're pointing out, rightly. We have a county standard, but then these other jurisdictions, they modify that standard to their own liking. And so the town of
Without review, I presume. It doesn't come back to the county and
no.
they.
No, it's an internal kind of decision made by their elected officials. And so Tiburon, for example, I believe Tiburon actually mandates a structural overcut section, which is not actually mandated by the Marin County standard. So Tiburon is actually an example where they extend the ultimate pavement restoration somewhat arbitrarily. It's a requirement. It's not a function of the road like the county standard on this one example. But it is important to also mention, though, that we are seeing quite a bit of success in the way we've adapted our CIP at the planning level, at the design level, at the construction level. So we do want to take it this next step with the pilot program. But we're also seeing quite a bit of opportunity and success within our own CIP with our staff and in operations. So that I think that's a kind of an important point to make here, you know.
Cool. Public comment?
There are none.
Okay. Well, it's a refer and request and refer or something.
It's just an information.
Information, you know. Okay, well, we'll be looking forward to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next one, Network Infrastructure Refresh Project. That's a mouthful.
Morning, directors. My name is Brett Uppendahl, Finance Director here, and today we have Brad Taylor, our Information Technology Department Manager, here to discuss our upcoming network infrastructure upgrade project. And we'll go ahead and get the PowerPoint going. And this is a review and refer item.
Great. It's gonna be a tough act to follow. I'm Brad Taylor, IT Manager. Thank you, Chair Russell and members of the board for hearing this item this morning. So we're gonna talk today a little bit about The network infrastructure, kind of the current state of the network infrastructure here at the district, some of the drivers that are sort of that are pushing us to look at this refresh project, the benefits that we're hoping to gain by the refresh, and of course, some cost estimates. So since I joined the district, we've been very focused on IT and sort of reconstituting the IT staff as best we can. We've made some great progress in terms of hiring some really, key players on our team. We've also been focusing on service delivery, but what is clear is that we need to sort of shift our focus a little bit now and look at the actually foundational infrastructure that underpins our overall network.
See, it's kind of like asphalt.
Yeah, well, it is similar, foundational component. So we did an assessment of the overall network, and it's not overly complex. We're not a huge organization that's widespread across the entire nation or continents and around the globe. But we do have 7 sites where we are, managing basically wide area network connectivity. Our current provider is TPX Communications, and we utilize a technology that's known as software-defined networking, SD-WAN technology. In our assessment, it was very much a very holistic view of the network and taking a look at everything that we are managing. There are quite a few kind of red flags as you look throughout the entire infrastructure. We have some issues with performance. We have issues with lack of redundancy in various sites. Overall, the network is overly complex kind of for the size of our organization and the applications and services that we're running. We have some serious issues with TPX right now in terms of their support. We have legacy hardware, which is end of life, that needs to be replaced. And, digging into these issues in a little more detail, the current solution really is not a good fit for our organization. It's overly complex. It introduces a great deal of overhead, and so it reduces our performance on the network. We have sites which have substandard cabling infrastructure, substandard fiber, and many of the sites have network infrastructure that's deployed in some very, very harsh conditions. So I think at the Bontempi treatment plant, we actually have networking gear that's in the pipe gallery. So water intrusion is an issue, et cetera, et cetera. Much of the core networking infrastructure is end of life, end of support. And we really kind of lack a lot of advanced features, modern support for modern protocols on the current infrastructure. And then lastly, the current provider really seems to lack kind of the technical capabilities and, more importantly, the presence to give us the support that we need. We've had some issues over the last 12 months that they have not been able to resolve, and we're still sort of struggling and suffering from. So kind of looking towards the solution to fix these major issues, we're looking to upgrade the hardware in the core networking components as well as the edge devices so that we can support bandwidth aggregation and we can actually support better performance. We also want to be able to leverage cellular broadband as a backup for our network. That was probably not an option when the network was kind of designed and refreshed a while back because the capacities on cellular broadband were just not there. But now with 5G service available, we now have, the opportunity to leverage cellular broadband as a backup. It's very cost effective and it tends to be very resilient when it comes to disasters. In terms of performance, we'd love to, eliminate the software-defined networking components, the VeloCloud components that are on the network, and move to something that's more, simple and easy to manage.
I hope that's a stock photo, not us.
Yeah, that is a stock photo, but
good.
we're not too far from that,
Yeah.
unfortunately. I don't think I have any pictures of Daniel, crawling underneath the cable mess. But bandwidth on demand is also another thing we'd like to be able to leverage. The carrier that we're looking at is basically a tier 1 carrier. We're looking at going with AT&T across the board, utilizing a service known as Advanced Switched Ethernet. And having that single carrier with a very strong presence is going to make it much easier to give us support. The other
When you say carrier, are we talking about who owns the fiber?
This is the data carrier who actually provides us the, you know, the intralata traffic. So AT&T,
Servers.
actually data services. Yeah. The contract that we're proposing to leverage is called CalNet 3. This is a statewide contract. Very advantageous terms. We don't need to necessarily sign on for any period of time. It's month to month. There's no startup costs and build costs. That's mandated as part of the contract. And there's some standard service level agreements associated with that contract that would be very advantageous for us. So obviously hardware, we need to replace the end of life hardware. The cabling is really a kind of a site by site thing. You'll see in the actual estimate of costs, we're going to have to go. We've already done an assessment of all the various sites. We have a quote from a vendor called Quest Technology Management to come in and clean up the cable plant, replace the cable, upgrade the cable, replace fiber, et cetera. So obviously the benefits of, you know, kind of fixing this foundational component of our network will improve our performance, reliability. It's going to ensure that the network is serviceable for future technologies. As we roll out more and more cloud services, we need to have this foundational layer to really support that. We obviously also want to simplify the infrastructure so that it's easier to manage and troubleshoot, and it actually will result in reduced costs for ongoing costs and total cost of ownership. We have some current pain points right now, specifically, for example, with our telephony, with our Cisco phone system, that it stem from the network and the complexity in that network. We need to get that fixed, of course. And then there's a great desire to really expand our Wi-Fi coverage and support throughout the entire district. And that's part of this project as well.
I presume landlines are staying in business.
There are some instances, yes, where we can't get rid of what's called, you know, POTS lines, plain old telephone service. Obviously service phones, emergency phones, things like that, stay on copper. The challenge we have is a lot of the carriers are making those very expensive for us to maintain. They'll continue to support it, but they're going to charge us, you know, 5, 6, 7 times multipliers to keep that service up. So the overall project really, again, was a holistic approach at the overall network. We have about $260,000 in hardware we're looking to acquire. This is Cisco Meraki hardware. So this includes switches, network switches, firewalls, wireless access points, and of course, optical gear for actually connecting the various sites that are using fiber. And then across the various sites within the district, we're looking at about $100,000 to remediate the infrastructure and the cabling. And this would just be something we would go site by site by site to do this work. So the overall ask is for about $364,000. And to summarize, you know, we are going to have to address this end of life hardware. It's ultimately going to, you know, go not only end of life, but end of support. So if we do have any sort of issues or we need any sort of security patches, those will not be available. And I'd be happy to take any questions.
I presume this is unbudgeted.
Yep, you're on.
The red light.
There we go.
Yeah.
No, we do have budget each year in the IT capital for projects like this. This is a little bit of an accelerated project as we're trying to lay the groundwork for the upcoming SAP and the upcoming transition to Microsoft services. So we are accelerating a bit, but we do have budget in the IT capital fund for this.
Cool. Questions?
Thanks, Brett. Good update. Seems like it's important work. I noted the proposed improvements to IT infrastructure or network infrastructure and our current admin and the operations buildings. We're also have had discussions about, you know, long-term strategies for those. So hopefully that's coordinated to some degree. We're not making investments that won't be paying off going forward.
So it's always a challenge, obviously. I think at this point, we're trying to be measured with the improvements that we make, and these ones are critical and necessary just to keep the lights running and keep, district staff with the technology they need. It is a little bit of a balance though over the long term, as we make decisions here for our physical locations, but this is something we really can't live without for the next, 3 to 5 years. And so given the timing, we just think this is something we have to go forward with. It's relatively low cost in comparison to other software and technology projects, but it is, an investment that's needed, sometime sooner before we get the whole cloud services set up for SAP and Microsoft. And I would also note too that a lot of this work will help up at Sky Oaks at the ranger station, and a lot of it will help at the treatment plants. That's really kind of the outer networks that probably take the brunt of the poor performance right now. And so we're doing a lot of core work here at these locations to help support what will be improved performance at the more remote locations.
So we can't just replace the string between the cans?
Just a bigger string.
A couple of questions. One, do all of these sites already have fiber run to them?
We have fiber run between this building and the corporation yard. There are some fiber runs throughout the Sky Oaks kind of campus, if you will. But for the most part, a lot of these sites are a single site, single MPO. Sometimes the fiber will run from the carrier to that site. But in this particular project, we're replacing the fiber between the corporation yard and the admin building and rerunning fiber around the Sky Oaks campus. That's fiber that we own.
Right. Is there a benefit to having fiber run to all of our sites, or is that part of a plan as we?
It's not necessarily available in all locations.
And that's an
It is
AT&T
certainly-
restriction?
Yeah, it's a carrier restriction.
Okay.
It's certainly advantageous for the carrier. When AT&T does offer it, we usually, go with fiber for the
Great.
last mile.
And then if we could just go back to the redundancy piece, without fiber running to these sites, what are our backup options if there's a failure?
So in this design, we are going to be using cellular broadband as backup at each of these remote sites. So the primary connection will be with AT&T through this advanced switched Ethernet solution. And then the failover would be AT&T based cellular data transmit.
Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned about cellular as a backup, in a large scale disaster, because the Bay Area still has not experienced a large scale disaster in the cell phone era on this. And hopefully we have some sort of, much like AT&T's FirstNet or whatever the Verizon priority is, to be able to include that in the system. But would also encourage looking at, and it's making really big leaps. It might not be for everywhere, but the Starlink system as a redundancy, especially up at Sky Oaks, in the hinterland, because it's consistent. We're actually seeing public safety agencies use as a primary internet connection now because of the AT&T issues and Verizon issues. So something to consider, especially for those sites.
So we've looked at Starlink specifically for more remote sites where there is no carrier service options. So
Great.
It's definitely a way to go.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's interesting. I was less than I expected. So
Less cost.
dollars. Yeah. So, it looks like something to do. I am a little concerned about Matt's question though, about, you have a freeway on your property and then you join the 2-lane country road with AT&T with their cable, their fiber or lack of fiber.
Yeah, all of the treatment plants, Sky Oaks, obviously these facilities, AT&T has considerable presence, and they actually built out fiber infrastructure for us specifically up at Sky Oaks. So they've sort of made some investments, and then on the cellular side, the wireless side, we are going to be leveraging FirstNet service. So in the event of a disaster, FirstNet gives critical infrastructure providers, priority on that network.
Does the replacement of the cable, the fiber between here and the yard, is that just pulling something through a conduit?
There is available conduit. The challenges that we have are in the facilities themselves.
Mhm.
So in this building, we are kind of loath to disturb the plenum ceiling if we can help, because there is some asbestos, et cetera, et cetera. So that's interestingly enough, the run from between the buildings is actually very straightforward.
Well, I'm sure we can follow the county's lead and put the right trash cans under the leaks
There
if
you go.
needed. Okay, public comment?
Yes, Bill Sauter.
Thanks very much for the presentation. Really interesting to see the plumbing that underlies all the data the district has. It has an enormous amount of data, which can be more than a century's worth, which can be extremely useful in making decisions. A dozen years ago, when the district wanted to put a new 10 million gallon tank at White Hill, we were able to use historic district data on its 9 gravity feed areas to show that not only didn't the district need 10 million gallons of new storage, but the storage it needed was primarily in Ross. It was what Director Schmidt calls decision-making data, and making that data available to the public resulted in improved reliability and availability, and it also saved the district millions of dollars in unnecessary infrastructure. As the district undertakes this important upgrade to its network infrastructure, I'd encourage a fresh look at how district information can be made more widely available to the public. Marin Water has an engaged and interested customer base who is interested in helping the district achieve its goals. The more information the district can share with this supportive constituency, the better decisions will be made and the stronger public buy-in will result. I know this agenda item focuses on data sharing infrastructure, but it seems like an ideal time to consider how that data could be more widely distributed and used. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil.
There are no further speakers.
Okay, well, with that, we'll adjourn.
Will you take a motion to refer to the full board?
Motion.
Okay,
Yeah.
sure.
So
Uh,
moved.
Oh, sorry, second.
Okay, great.
Wasn't sure if that was a question. Future dates?
Yeah, next operations meeting is December 20. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There is a tour of